I used to believe marriages only end because of something dramatic. A loud fight, a betrayal, a moment of chaos that breaks everything. But that's not how my marriage ended. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter in one night. Instead, it faded, quietly, slowly, almost gently, so quietly that I didn't even realize something was wrong. You wake up one morning and the person beside you feels like a polite stranger. And the worst part? You can't point to a single moment where everything changed. Instead, it happens over thousands of tiny moments. Small silences, small decisions, small secrets, and those small things eventually become big enough to break you. This is the story of how a secret, quiet, subtle, unspoken, destroyed my marriage. And maybe, as you listen, you'll think about the silences in your own life. The questions you avoid, the conversations you delay, because sometimes, silence is the real danger. Part 1. The Illusion of a Good Marriage. English. If someone had asked me years ago, "How's your marriage?" I would have answered without hesitation, "We're fine." Not passionate, not extraordinary, but steady, and I thought stability meant happiness. We didn't argue often. We didn't slam doors or raise our voices. We lived in a calm routine that felt comfortable. But comfort is not connection. Silence is not intimacy. Predictability is not love. We woke up at the same time, but we didn't wake up together. We ate meals side by side, but rarely shared what was on our minds. We watched TV shows together, but barely paid attention to each other. Looking back now, I realize we were drifting long before anything big happened. But drifting feels gentle, until one day it's not. I remember the evenings the most. We used to talk for hours when we first met. Slowly, conversations shrank, from hours, to minutes, to nothing. Instead of talking, we scrolled on our phones. Instead of laughing, we just sat in quiet. Instead of asking, "How are you really?" we asked nothing. And the worst part? I didn't feel alarmed. I mistook emotional distance for adult maturity. I thought, this is just what long-term marriage looks like. But that wasn't marriage, that was the slow beginning of the end. Part 2. Early signs I didn't want to see. The secret didn't appear suddenly. It didn't land in our lives with drama or confrontation. Instead, it slipped in quietly, hidden inside small changes. Changes so subtle that questioning them felt unnecessary. It began with late replies to simple messages. Not hours late, just a few minutes longer than usual. But consistency makes patterns, and patterns make truth. Their phone started staying face down more often. Notifications were silenced, and they began stepping away to answer calls. I noticed it all, but noticing is not the same as acknowledging. And I wasn't ready to acknowledge anything. Then came the emotional distance. So small at first I thought I imagined it. They laughed less. They listened less. Their eyes didn't soften the way they used to when they looked at me. I would share something about my day, and instead of engaging, they would say, and change the subject. It felt like talking into an empty room. But silence is easier than confrontation. So I convinced myself everything was fine. They're stressed. It's just a phase. Everyone grows distant sometimes. These were lies I told myself to avoid the truth. What I didn't realize back then was how powerful small patterns can be. A relationship doesn't fall apart because of one big moment. It falls apart because of hundreds of tiny moments when connection is replaced with avoidance. They stopped sharing the little details of their day. Stopped asking about mine. Stopped noticing when I looked tired or sad. These were once automatic, now they were gone. And the scariest part? I adjusted to the new version of us without even resisting. I shrank myself to fit the silence. Because when you love someone, you try to protect the relationship even if it means ignoring your own loneliness. But secrets don't stay small. They grow in the spaces where honesty should be. And once a secret begins to grow, it spreads quietly through every part of a relationship. I didn't know it yet, but the real damage had already begun. Part 3. How the secret grew in silence. Secrets don't suddenly appear in a relationship. They grow slowly, quietly, buried under routine and politeness. And that's exactly what happened to us. The distance between us created the perfect hiding place. Silence became a shield, one neither of us questioned. And in that silence, something began to grow. The first sign was emotional unavailability. I could feel them pulling away, not with anger, but with indifference. They stopped telling me about their thoughts, their stress, their dreams. Conversations became surface level, safe, controlled. Anything deeper was avoided. I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. I asked myself, why don't they trust me anymore? But the truth was even harder. They weren't hiding just information, they were hiding their entire inner world from me. Then the practical changes began. Decisions that used to involve both of us were now made alone. Money moved without discussion. Schedule changes happened without informing me. Plans were written down on calendars I didn't have access to. When I asked, the answers were vague. It wasn't important. I forgot to tell you. Don't worry about it. Those sentences became red flags. I ignored. Each small decision made without me was a quiet message. You're not part of this. What surprised me most wasn't the secret itself. It was how natural the distance had become. We became experts at pretending everything was fine. We laughed at the right moments. We shared meals like normal couples. We even held hands sometimes. But emotional closeness? That had disappeared long before either of us admitted it. We were living together, but not living with each other. And I didn't realize how dangerous that was. Secrets don't need lies to grow. They grow in absence of communication, absence of openness, absence of emotional safety. The secret became a presence in our home. A quiet one, but noticeable if you looked closely. I felt decisions slipping away from us and into them. I felt excluded from plans I didn't even know existed. And worst of all, I felt myself shrinking just to keep the peace. That's the power of a secret. It changes you long before you even discover it. Part 4. The Slip. We were sitting at the kitchen table, a place where we had shared countless meals and countless silences. They were talking casually, almost absent-mindedly, when they mentioned something that didn't belong. A plan, a decision, a commitment I had never heard of. At first, I thought I misheard. So I asked gently, what was that? They froze, not dramatically, not guiltily, just slightly. A tiny pause that said, more than words ever could. Then they answered, oh, that. I didn't think it mattered. Part 4. The questions. I felt something tighten in my chest. I asked again, more firmly this time. When did you decide this? Why didn't we talk about it? Their answers were soft, careful, almost rehearsed. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't want to bother you. I thought you wouldn't care. Each excuse felt like a small knife, not enough to destroy, but enough to cut. Part 4. The Unraveling. And then, casually, the full truth revealed itself. They had been making long-term plans without me. Plans that affected our finances, our future, our daily life. They weren't hiding an affair. They weren't lying about their feelings. They were hiding something much more silent. They were building a life that didn't require me. I wasn't betrayed by another person. I was betrayed by being excluded. Part 4. The Painful Realization. The moment I understood that, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about a single secret. It was about the pattern. The secrecy. The silence. The choices made behind closed emotional doors. They hadn't stopped loving me suddenly, they had simply stopped including me. And that, somehow, hurt more. Betrayal by exclusion is quiet, but devastating. It doesn't scream. It doesn't throw things. It simply whispers, you don't matter here anymore. Fan 5. The Quiet Collapse. People imagine that when a marriage ends, there must be a dramatic moment. A fight, a betrayal, a confession, but the truth is much quieter. My marriage didn't break in a single moment. It dissolved slowly, like paper left out in the rain. Part 5. Attempts to fix what's already broken. After the secret came out, we tried to fix things. We talked late into the night. We promised to be more open. We said all the right words, but they were empty, floating in the space between us. You can rebuild a house after a storm, but rebuilding trust requires something both people must still hold. And I realized one of us had already let go. Part 5. Living beside the ruins. Truth came out, but nothing improved. We moved around each other like ghosts in the same house. Polite, careful, empty. Even our smiles felt borrowed, expressions we wore out of habit. I realized something heartbreaking. The marriage hadn't ended when the secret was revealed. It had ended long before that. In the nights we didn't talk, in the mornings we didn't connect, in the moments when silence replaced effort. Part 5. The Final Quiet Ending. There was no final fight, no dramatic walkout, no slammed doors, just a morning where we sat across from each other, and both knew it was over. The strange thing is, endings don't hurt all at once. They hurt in waves. First disbelief, then grief, then silence, a silence that feels heavier than any argument could. And that was how our marriage ended, not with destruction, but with acceptance. Closing reflection. Looking back now, I've learned something important. Secrets don't destroy relationships. Silence does. Avoiding conversations kills more marriages than infidelity ever could. Some people think love ends with betrayal, but often, it ends when one person stops showing up emotionally. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, don't ignore the silence the way I did. Talk about the small things. Ask the hard questions. Because silence grows roots, and once it does, it's almost impossible to pull out. Thank you for listening to Spoken by Reddit. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more long-form, calming narrations. Your support helps us share more stories that deserve to be heard. Until next time, take care of your heart and your truth.